Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's installment of my podcast, Let's Talk Horses. I'm your host, Sarah Watt, and we have a very special guest joining us this week, a returning guest / my brother, Brendon Watt. Welcome to the
Oh, I
show.
like it. I got so many titles. Returning guest / brother. It's amazing.
You're pretty important, basically.
I'm a pretty big deal. Yeah.
So, whereabouts in the world are you right now, Brendon?
I am at El Lugar in Costa Rica, where your horse is, and it's amazing. You know, I've been here for I think I've been here for like 3 weeks now, and I'm like, wow. So
amazing. The podcast that just came out, well, it'll be last week by the time this one comes out, because this one will come out next week. But I did just like a episode by myself to recap my 2 weeks at El Lugar, and it was kind of meant to be about horses, but it actually more ended up being all about, because I kind of got home from that trip 2 days ago. And I don't think I've ever felt more weird in my whole entire life. Like really and I talked a bit about it on the podcast, where you're in this place, like for me, Costa Rica, but more so what they've created, what Gary and Dane and everyone contributing to El Lugar, what they've created there is something that's so, like, I think I'm just realizing how different that space is and kind of like what is available there. And so I got home to the Sunshine Coast, and I mean, you know this place, you've lived here many years as well, where nothing really changes here. It does, it obviously does, but it's at a pace that's very different. And I got home and was just like, whoa, like I didn't really quite know how to handle it. Like it was really uncomfortable, I want to say. Like it was this space where and so I really started looking at it and looking at like, what is it that's available in El Lugar? What did I experience there? What was the change? Like what was really possible there? And what if I didn't have to just keep it there? Like what if I could really have, and to me, it felt like what was coming up for me was like the raw magic of the place. Like this, this thing of like where, go.
Well, I was going to say too, because you know, it's interesting as well. And this, I don't even know how to talk about this part, but you said the thing that Gary, Dane, and everyone has created is also the acknowledgement in your part in the creation of that.
Yeah.
You know, your part in the creation of that space. And then, you know, going out into the world and being that source for difference. Like one of the things I've been looking at here, and I was having a conversation with a friend before this, and I was like, hey, help me look at something. And, you know, I was looking at where I've made people the source for certain people, the source for different things in my life, but also money, the source for different things in my life. And it became very obvious here, it became very obvious, and more so obvious in my world, the limitation that creates with receiving.
Yeah.
You know, because if you look at like, and it's interesting that we do that, but if you look at, especially if you make a person the source for anything in your life, you can't receive it from anyone but that person.
Yeah.
And this is where we screw ourselves up with relationships, and we try and create relationships as this autonomous thing. And that's what I love about horses. You know, is you can't do that on a horse.
Yeah.
You can't exist alone on a horse, or it's just you're never going to have enjoyment out of it.
Yeah, or they're going to buck you off because they're like, who even is riding me right now?
Yeah.
But what you were saying there as well has exactly is what has been coming up for me, but sort of like a slightly different flavor, because it is that thing of like, because I look at like to this moment in time, my whole life is where I am right now is based on the choices I've made. Like every little choice along the way has put me right here, right now. And I'm like, but like, why did I choose what I chose? And like, just really looking at like, and I guess it is the source thing. Like, who do you think about before you choose, or what do you think about before you choose? Like another person or money, and like where that just completely steers you off the path of like you and puts you in a place of like, I'm still kind of settling on it and looking at it myself, where it's really like I'm looking at my whole life as like how much of my life is even really me?
Well, I actually got to that a few months ago when I started looking at the thing with living in Houston. And I was there one day and I was just kind of like looking at my life and I was like, whose fucking life have I created?
Right.
You know, I was like, whose life is this? You know, if I'm not enjoying myself in each moment, what am I choosing? But with that, one of the things that's also becoming more obvious is how much none of it belongs to us. You know, because if you look at, I was doing a telecall before, and this woman was asking this question about help, and I asked the question that Gary asked in the CF class of what does being helped mean to you? You know, for me, what came up was being saved, and then pretty similar with all this stuff that came up with this woman that I was talking with, and what I was looking at with her is look at the difference between help, looking for help and the willingness to receive. You know, you come in as a baby, you're not looking for help so that people will feed you. You're willing to receive so people feed you, you know, and take care of you and love you and care for you. And it's somewhere along the lines we get that twisted into need. We get that twisted into being someone has to be the source in order for us to get anything. And it's just all twisted. So that's it's one of the things I love about Access is it simplifies it simplifies what is.
Yeah. But I was even looking at that when I got home, because I think the other thing about El Lugar is it's a place where the tools of access it's like everything is consciousness. Like, I don't know, without making it sound significant, but all of the tools we have in Access, they're not, we kind of brand them as the tools of access, but they're really just an invitation to consciousness. Like they're an invitation to have more consciousness in your world and as your life. And for me, I also just realized being at El Lugar, how it really is the tools of consciousness and access consciousness in motion. Like, and I even got home and was like, fuck, even the tools of access I've used in a way that I think I was using them to like be like fit something or be something, where it was that thing again about the source or this autonomy conversation coming up. But essentially I was choosing the tools and using the tools like to fit something. Like it's really interesting how even
we
that
do that.
becomes, And I just wanted to quickly say as well, when you mentioned before about this thing of like choosing joy in every moment, like you said you were living in Houston and all of a sudden, like me, I'm like, what, whose life have I even created? I don't think we're ever taught that you can actually just have a life where every moment you're like a pleasure seeker, a joy seeker. Like that's not only possible, but it's okay to do that. There was something else you said then that I wanted to hit on as well, but it's just really this thing of like how much everything outside of us becomes way more important than what is truly available as being us in this world.
Yeah, and we have to make it important based on the lie that it's outside of us.
Yep.
You know, and it's like, and you are not alone with what you brought up there with using the tools to fit. There is few people, and myself included, that I'm like, there is few people I know that don't do that, and myself included, with where I've done that and been doing that. And you know, it was one of the things with what I got to a couple of years ago with creating my sobriety. But you know, it's like people have such an idea also on you know, on all of it, like even facilitating consciousness. I was talking to people before, and they would talk. I was on this other thing that I was doing. I was on a Facebook thing, and I had a busy day. Oh my goodness. And you know, the lady was talking about something about followers, and I said, you know what, I have really enjoyed lately bringing up that I'm a recovering alcoholic, because how are you going to follow that? You know, and it's, you know, as Gary says in Access, all sacred cows go to slaughter. There's nothing sacred about consciousness. we all make the choices that we make based on no reason, because we can choose.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what, I mean, Gary asked me, I don't even know why I'm saying this, but I'm going to say it anyway. Gary asked me this question the other day when I went and had a conversation with him about things. And he asked me about being an alcoholic. And I was like, yeah, I can't drink. And he said, yeah, but see, notice that you won't even admit to yourself that you're an alcoholic. And I'm like, wow, that's interesting, because I'll say it on everything, right? Yep. I'm the first to talk to people about being a recovering alcoholic, but I didn't realize I wasn't actually willing to admit that to myself.
Yeah. And
that's like, man, there's so much freedom in that when you're willing to actually see what it is that what you choose and what those choices create, and you're willing to have that honesty with you.
Yeah. And I wonder how many people, myself included, have that thing. Like for you, it's that you're an alcoholic, but for all of us, we have those things, those things. Yeah. Like our own form of addiction, or like whatever it is that we hide so much from ourselves. And then we take something like access consciousness or whatever your chosen modality is, and we kind of like use it even to mask the true things that we're actually avoiding within ourselves. Like, yeah.
And I mean, one of the other things that it's interesting, I've got this, you know, you'll have a 5-minute conversation with that man, and it's like, and within it is 10 universes of things that you could dissect into 10 other universes of everything. But one of the other things that he asked me, because I've been looking at, you know, for myself, I was like, fuck, I feel like all I've been doing for the last 2.5 years is proving to people that I can be better, and proving to people that I can be different, and proving that I can make up for the damage that I've done. And he asked me this question that was interesting. He said, okay, so would you say you have put in minimum effort or maximum effort to make up for what you've done? And I so wanted to say maximum, but it was minimum. Yeah. And he said, okay, so why don't you look at what you can gift the world, not what you can receive from it. Yeah. And when he said that, I realized, see, because you could go to, and what I kind of almost automatically went to was, okay, in order to do maximum, I'm going to have to prove more.
Yeah.
How do I turn up the proving? But what it was when I looked at it was, wow, I haven't been willing to offer the world all of me.
Exactly.
Everything that I am, like all the kindness, all the care, just everything.
Yeah.
And again, let's talk horses, you know, like they don't hide from you any part of them.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, you're a person in the spotlight. Like, you've created your life to be someone who is like has a public presence. But what I'm also finding interesting is that everything you've just said about this thing of like making up for the damage done, but I don't know if it's quite that, but it's this thing of like, if each of us was willing to give the world the gift of us, like of who I truly am, whether you're in the spotlight and that means you're facilitating classes, or whether you're someone who lives alone and you garden and you have some animals, like it doesn't matter what you do in this world. Like the true, I don't know, it's like gets a little bit significant. I'm like, it's like this.
No, it's but well put, because it actually doesn't matter what you do in the world. No, it matters what you be. And then from that, because if you look at look at the way the world works, people love significance. You know, how many followers do you have? What are you saying? Like, how does that make sense? Give me the answer. All of that. Access is not that.
No.
And, you know, and it's like, I even tried to turn access into something that it isn't.
Yeah.
You know,
I think like you said, pretty much everyone has or does kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not that. And it's like, you'll get a big chunk of what access is in the bars class. You know, it's like, it's access is about empowering you to know what you know. It's about being in question. It's about creating a world that that's primary target is more consciousness. you know,
And it's about
then,
receiving too, like learning to receive too. And gift, like be that true gifting and receiving energy, which like really for me is what the bars really are as well.
And Elugar. It's like, phew.
So let's switch to horses for a moment, because the help thing that you brought up before as well, I think so many people confuse what help is. And I know you touched on it with the lady that was on your telecall, but because so many people with horses think they need to help horses from a place of where like the horse is the victim or something like that as well. So what, like, is there anything where horses have shown you like what the true version of help is? Like,
well, you said something in the conscious horse class that we just did that kind of registered with me in a different way, where you said, every time I ride a horse, I look at what we can create together. And I was like, oh, and I know that I do that. But there's more, you know. It's like when you know you're doing something and being something, but you're not accessing all that you could. That's actually, how do I say this? I've seen this so much in my life, where I would see something that I'm being and doing, but not to the degree that I could. There's always more, and stopping myself with trying to define it. But here's what I used to do a lot would be, oh, I'm not being enough or doing enough. If you go to that, as soon as you go to that with anything in your life, you've crushed it. And to the best of my ability, and to offer this as an awareness with what I do now, is, oh, there's more. How does it get any better than this? Like, what would it take to tap into more of that? Not what's wrong with me for not being everything I should be. So I loved when you said that, because I was like, oh yeah, that's cool. That's way bigger.
And it's that question thing too, right? Like, I think, because for me, like I go down these rabbit holes and I'm like, now I just need something to like bring it to a point where I can kind of, and I think question is the antidote to all of this. Like this place where everywhere you go and you're like, oh, I'm in that energy again. I'm in that space where I'm not being myself. I'm proving, I'm like, this is happening. I'm bastardizing consciousness or the tools or something. Like in any moment, or I'm with my horse and I'm trying to like have this expectation of myself or of my horse. Just ask any question, and it just like automatically like changes everything for you. But looking at horses specifically, for them, that you'd become a horse then, because that's their whole premise of existence, is just this constant and
question.
And
that
like
part too, when you the other part that was a standout for me in the many standouts of that class that you guys facilitated, was when you said, horses are not like us. Then no, horses are not like people. And I was like, oh fuck. Every time I'm trying to be a people with a horse, it doesn't work. If I'm being a horse with a horse, then it works, you know. But also that thing with what you talk about with, you know, kind of going to freak out, or you've got, you and I would have a lot of similarities with that, with what we grew up with. You know, which is interesting. When I hear you talk about different things, I'm like, oh, that has a similar energy to it, which is how much of this is impelled at you throughout your life. You know, like if you can't, one of the ones for me is, if you can't control something, go to less than. If you can't control something, go to pathetic. If you can't control something, go to anger. If you can't control something, go to something else so that you can control it.
Rather than what?
Question. You know, and rather than also recognize that, wait a minute, that's not mine. That's a coping mechanism or a personality that I created, many of them that I created in order to make sense of any of it.
And, you know, it's coming up for me, so I'm just going to mention it as well with this this energy of help. It's like I found myself, but you were there with me in Elugar in this last trip, and I talked about it a bit in my last podcast from last week. And I'm going to talk about it more, where it came to a point where I had to help 2 of my horses die, like to choose to be able to leave their bodies, which was something that like was so it was actually really easy, but it's so interesting how even with something like that, we pile so many things onto it to make it like a human experience, whereas for a horse, it's like there's nothing in their world where. And it was so cool because I was messaging one of my friends here that lives in Australia, and she's done a lot of access conscious horse classes, but not for many years. And you know, because she first of all was like, oh, you know, Sarah, like if the vet's saying to put the horse down, you know, pock and pot all of those expectations. She's like, vets, like oftentimes horses don't want to die. But I was like, oh, even that doesn't. And then she messaged me again and she's like, how's it all going? And I said, look, I think I'm going to put him down. And she's like, okay, well, just never forget there's no right way to die. And I'm like, that is so true. Like, it's not like, oh, in order for him to leave his body, it needs to like look this certain way. It's like, if now is the time that animal requires my help to intervene and be there for him to be able to move on, like that's just a choice as well.
Well, and there's this beautiful thing that that Raz is the being, for anyone who doesn't know, Raz is the being that basically Gary channeled a lot of the beginnings of access through. And, you know, he talked about this thing on death, which is, you know, the forest doesn't mourn, you know, the death of creatures. Creatures don't mourn the death. We put our emotions on it rather than recognize that it's just change. And the way he says it, it's beautiful. I'm not quite sure where it is, but it really is that thing of we thoughts, feelings, emotions, with all of it, where it's not that. And it was a beautiful experience to be there with the horses and with you, and it was just like, and I was tearing up, but that wasn't from sadness. It was from just an acknowledgement of, hey, you have been such a gift in my life. Like one of those horses of yours, Inversor, who was the horse I had before that, and he, like, Jesus Christ, that horse saved my life on several occasions. And that's not like, oh, he saved my life, it's significant. No, I don't. It's not that. He did. Yeah. I needed help. I fucking needed it. Like when I was here in Elugar and I was on the last 3 days of my bender to end all benders, you know, and I rode him drunk, and I don't even barely remember it. He saved my life. I have no doubt about it. And but talk about help. You know, he was like, all right, you know.
Yeah.
He
they
was
don't
willing to be there.
Exactly. Yeah. There's nothing in their world. They will just show up and be like whatever that is that you require in the moment of them.
Yeah. And I wonder what it would be like if we could be more of that.
Yeah. For them and for ourselves and for each other and for the planet. And and I just wanted to mention quickly too, because you mentioned Raz, and you know, we've sort of both, you came to Access a bit before me, but it's been like, you know, 10 years or something now. And Raz was like, and Raz was long before that, right? Like this was 20 plus years ago that Gary stopped channeling him. But you can access all of that now. So, well, soon we launch, Access is launching like this really cool online, like an app, like a streaming platform where they're going to release all of the history of classes. So everything older than 2 years, and not including a few classes, certified facilitator trainings and body classes and things like that. But there's literally like thousands upon thousands of classes and calls that you can have access to right from back when Raz was part of Access classes with Gary. Like at your fingertips. So
I mean, and I've heard some of those old ones, because basically the way that it was Gary would facilitate the first few days, and then he would channel Raz for the last afternoon of class, and people would ask him, and just mind-blowing stuff, like just amazing. And also with Access, like there's classes that, just so many and so many gifts. So I think it's just it's so wonderful that the world's gonna have that.
Yeah. And I wonder, like, with that level of like consciousness and tools available, like where like some of that can start changing, where I don't know, you perceive the classes back then when Gary was willing to sit in a class and channel. And I mean, even when we were kids, like I remember like we would be into all sorts of weird shit, and now it seems like the earth got very like prude about certain things. Like consciousness became, and like certain things where it's like Access is weird and all this sort of stuff. But I wonder, like, breaking through with some of this stuff, how much maybe we can become a little bit more of this magic and like the possibilities, like what's being created in Elugar, but it cracks out of that bubble and actually starts to be available everywhere.
Well, and with that, and one of the things I've been looking at a lot is we have to stop creating ourselves as separate from the universe.
Yeah.
Because it's like, if you look at, and they talk about how they call it the spiritual plane and then this plane on Earth have set, however they talk about it, but basically, when they draw the things where the angels, people would see them and stuff like that and whatever. But we kind of lost touch with certain things, but also made separation more valuable than being in communion.
Yep.
That's the part that, and we can change it.
Yeah, totally. And it's actually way easier to change it than the fucking hard work we did to create all of it in the first place. Like, like you can literally I was listening to something, I don't know, maybe it was a benevolent capitalism class or something, where it's like, oh no, Dane was talking. Anyway, it was somewhere, and he's like, do you realize that in any moment that something feels heavy, you can just choose something different? Like you can just literally change it in that moment to anything else. Like, and it's like that thing you said, like with the antidote to all of this is just the question.
Yeah. And that's why I love that consciousness is not spirituality. It's not about, here we have the answer, here we have it right. Like Gary was on some call, I don't know, a few weeks ago or something, and he was talking about, he's like, I woke up in the middle of the night and I was stressing about money. And he went, wait a minute, what's this choice going to create? Is this choice, stressing about money, going to create more revenue streams? No. What the fuck am I doing? Change. And if you realize that, like if you go, oh, wait a minute, I'm worrying about the future. In that moment, okay, is worrying about the future going to create a greater future? I think we can all agree, no. So it's like, what am I doing? What am I choosing this for? Yeah. And then that's where you can make a different choice. And that's what I love too about riding horses is you can start off on a bad ride. 10 seconds later, if you're willing to get out of your head and choose something different, great ride. Yeah,
cool. So let's quickly, just a couple of things before we wrap up. Do you want to just talk a little bit about the horses that you rode or you've been riding while you're in Costa Rica, and anything about them that, I don't know, that they've shown you, or any moments where there was like, I don't know, something that you'd like to share?
Well, yeah. So I got here, my horse here is Cristal, and he's pretty full on. And I got here, when I got here a few weeks ago, and I just was like, basically felt like I couldn't ride, but it wasn't that I couldn't ride. It was, I wasn't being me. I wasn't connected to my zone of awareness, which meant I couldn't connect to his. And it took me 3 days before, we were over on the other side of the property, and he was like flat foot walking the whole way. And I was like, this horse doesn't flat foot walk,
It doesn't.
It doesn't. And it's a miracle when you can do that. But for me, I have to be willing to be so much space in my head that he's willing to connect to me like that. And I can ride him from his head. But for me, I look at, man, I try to do control in my life in certain areas. And I'm like, if I really wrote, like, we talked about in the class where Gary brought it up and he's like, you ride a horse like you ride your life, basically.
Yeah.
And I was like, ain't that the truth? Because,
Yeah.
so, it's just like, it's for me, it's a constant learning. Like one of the horses, which another thing that I kind of learned here was Alexis, the cowboy here, he put me on his stallion, and so for the last couple of days, I was riding him over there, and beautiful horse. Like just this thing is, and such a sweet creature. But Alexis really wanted me to buy him. So he's projecting at me, buy him, pushing him at me, buy him, pay half now, you can pay me half later. And he's, and I was like, and I started stressing out because I was like, I don't want to disappoint Alexis, and he wants me to have it and I should have it. And it put me in a choke financially just to even look at it. And I was like, what am I doing? I live my life like this. Okay, enough. Be willing to say no. Be willing to recognize what doesn't work for you and say no. And I was like, oh my God. Like, so things like that, like you'll have something like that and you'll see how that kind of forms a thread through other things of the way that you choose, in your life.
Yeah. And it's so it's so cool there because there's nowhere in the world, there probably is, but nowhere that I've found yet where number one, they would take a 3-year-old stallion and put him in a group of other horses and go on a trail ride, and then put someone on the horse that, they don't he knows you, but, where they're riding under his guidance, and like this place where it's like, there's such a lack of control, but obviously they still do it in some ways, but it's just one of those places in the world where it creates such a different space to ride from as well. And I wish I could just invite everyone in the world at some point to go and ride a horse in Costa Rica, like at El Lugar. Yeah.
And ride a horse at El Lugar, and I'm going to go even further and say buy one, because you get your own horse here, and talk about freedom to explore. It's such a beautiful thing. And it's the other thing I would say with that too is because it is interesting to try and put into words this place, and even the horse riding, because we've been spoiled. It's just amazing. But reading
and every
the place,
time I go, I've ridden there, I don't know, probably 100 times now over the years, and every time I go, it's completely mind-blowing. Like,
I know I'm jonesing for it. I haven't been in like a week over there since you left. I'm like, they need to get that bridge finished. We need more money for the bridge. Get the bridge finished. I'll swim over there. I'll swim with my horse. I'll do whatever.
And then just one more quick question before we finish up. We talked a little bit about when we were at the Conscious Horse, Conscious Rider class about you becoming a Conscious Horse, Conscious Rider facilitator, which is a bit of a journey, but I'm so happy to hear that you're choosing that. So do you want to just quickly talk a little bit about what facilitating these classes for you would be? Like what that choice looks like?
I hadn't been even close to be willing to choose that, because I always had this idea of, I'm very capable on a horse, but facilitating anything to do with them and knowing anything else about it was just like, no, I could never do that. And, and I was like, you know what, that's bullshit. And it would be so fun. So I'm like, I already contacted Susie and I was like, when's your next ESSE class? And I also talked to Hugo here about, I was like, hey, would you be willing for me when I've got some space in my schedule to come and stay here and do work experience with the Cowboys? Because I came down here for a month last September, doing some tradie stuff, but also I cowboyed for a couple of weeks, branding cattle and rounding up cattle and, just riding off into the sunset. And it was just wonderful. So, just for me, for me, anything like that teaches me more about who I am.
Yeah. And I think really that's what the classes are about. And it's interesting because,
and that was epic, that class.
Yeah. And you'll like, as a facilitator, because I'm the same, I'm like, there's so much I still can learn. There's so much more about riding and different things that I could learn about horses, but I also have gotten so like trusting and confident to know the people that show up to my classes are the people that are going to receive the things that I can talk to. So like it creates this space where people come to your classes and walk away like just completely and utterly changed from the class. And you never have to worry about it's like in Access, because we never function from answer. It's like everything is a question. So yeah.
And that that's one of the beautiful things about being an access facilitator. When you're actually being an access facilitator, is you don't have to know it all. You don't have to know anything. You have to have a question. And, like I remember when I first started facilitating the COP classes, the CFP classes, when they were that. And I was like terrified, thinking there's people who have been in access for 10 years, 20 years coming to these classes. And I'm thinking, I'm not going to know anything. But, and I had all this shit. And it was just like, it was all, anywhere you go to that, it's all designed to create more separation anyway. It's like, so that's why I like saying now, I'm a recovering alcoholic, and hi.
People are like, huh?
They're like, what the fuck? Are you supposed to be a total derelict? Yeah, well.
And I think also, like, because everything out there, the places you go to seek out knowledge or to learn things, the people are just telling you, like, they're just giving you answers and this, and this. And the thing I love about Access and the great facilitators of Access are that there's not an answer in their world. It's this space of like, I don't even know. It's really sort of hard to explain. Oh, the one thing you can liken it to is being around horses, like this space where it's just an open book of question and possibility. So
and that is, it's going to be such a valuable commodity in the future, is going to be your willingness to be vulnerable. Like, because I'll listen to anyone. I'll listen to anyone who knows nothing, who's willing to be honest with themselves.
Yeah.
Like if someone's willing to say, hey, I fucked up, I made this choice, and here's the way I've gotten through it, and here's the way I'm still getting through it. I'm like, tell me more.
Yeah.
I want to hear more about it. Like, what did you choose that for? What showed up for you? Like, how is that for you? What is that? What are you looking at now? What difference did that create? I'm like, fucking tell me about all of it, because the truth will always make you lighter. What's true for you will always make you lighter. So it creates more lightness in the world. Doesn't matter what you've chosen if you're willing to be honest with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, like, one thing as well with the people, like, because I meet a lot of horse people in my life. And I kind of had this saying, this thing of like, sometimes the best horse people are non-horse people, like people that are like, I don't know anything about horses, but I'll give it a try. I'll come in and I'll have a go. Because the horse is like, who the fuck are you? Like, that you're this person that's like completely honest that you know nothing, and you just in question, and the horse is like, oh, you feel more like me. Like, because horses don't think they know everything. They just go along asking questions and following what they think is going to create the greatest outcome. So yes.
Yep.
How does it get any better?
More horses. More horses, less people.
Yeah. Well, more horse people and more horse experiences.
More people who are not people, but more horse as a people thing.
Yeah. And people having more people having more horses in their lives.
Yeah, totally. We could have 8 billion horses on the planet, and
yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. We can only dream. Thank you so much. Thank you for being on here
You're
again.
welcome. Thank you.
A brilliant conversation. And I'm sure at some time in the future we'll be able to welcome you back onto this podcast.
And I'll be returning guests. I'll be two-time returning guest then. It'll be amazing. And
Yes.
still your brother. So that won't change.
Still my brother. Amazing. Yeah. All right. Well, enjoy El Lugar. Please, say hello.
Yes, I will.
Everyone.
I'll send you some photos of your horsey too. Yeah. I'll kiss your horse and send you a photo. All right.
Thank you for watching, everyone. See you next week.
Thank you, everyone. Ciao.